and welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Errol Louis, political columnist for the New York Daily News. Thanks for being on the show, Errol. I appreciate it. You've been on before. You're in the press a lot these days.
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
Yes,
you are. Did you plan it that way?
Well, in some ways I did. There is a theory that's been floating around for a while now. I'm sure you've heard that all media is converging and that you can't be attached to any one medium. So although I'm trained as a writer, and I've been doing that since I was about 19, increasingly there's been a need to get used to television, to use television, blogging, of course. And then most recently, about a year ago, I got a radio show, so I'm the morning man at WWRL, 1600 AM from 6 to 9 on weekdays.
10 wins.
and increasingly, what I'm finding is that you do one show, or you work in one medium, and you can spread it across all kinds of things. The same interview that you do on television or radio, you can use
everything.
In the
It's everything. Do you tweet?
I do, once in a while. In fact, I recently was moderating a debate between some of the mayoral candidates. And in between, both I and Brian Lehrer, who's a radio show host as well, we were both tweeting while we were sitting there waiting for our chance to ask questions.
Actually, to tell you the truth, we'll tweet about us. We'll tweet about you. To tell you the truth, I saw that Twitter belongs to not to the kids, and the kids don't want to Twitter that much.
Right.
It is the 25 or the 34 that are tweeting because for their own purposes. But anyway, you're not here to talk about. We're talking. So you've been in the press a lot, and I introduced you by saying you were a political journalist. Let's save the controversy of what got you in the press for a while. I want to speak more about the whole business of politicians. And I was thinking about it in preparing for you to come on, and I was going to talk to you about what's wrong with public service, and then intervening. As happens in the interview world, came the death yesterday of Senator Ted Kennedy. So it kind of put me off my approach. That was a real family of public service. What I wanted to say to you was that in today's world, with public servants, it's very hard to know sometimes, Errol, who's the servant and who's the public. Things are very mixed up. You've been doing this for a while. Have you seen the change?
I don't know if there's a change, to tell you the truth. Every few years, a bunch of politicians get packed off to prison because they tried to steal. And they usually have tried to steal in exactly the way that the last crew of crooks were trying to steal. The public's interest can very often be betrayed. There's a level of mediocrity and criminality that just seeps into this enterprise, and it's the flip side of democracy. The beauty of democracy is that anybody, a guy from humble origins, whether it's a Barack Obama or an Abraham Lincoln, can rise and become president. At the same time, somebody who has sort of come from nowhere, which is a great story. Well, there are people who come from nowhere, and there's a reason they're from nowhere. They've hidden their past. They don't have training. They're the wrong person for the job.
They don't have the pedigree.
And the reality is the public can elevate great leaders. They can also elevate some not-so-great leaders.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the actual stealing, the criminality of it so much as it's almost stealing from the public, the lack of trust, the lack of dedication to getting the job done, the wasting, the frittering away of time. I mean, you've been covering New York politics for a long time. Weren't you surprised, even someone as experienced as you, surprised by the shenanigans in Albany recently?
Well, I can tell you one thing I have definitely watched, even in the last 20 years, is the amount of lobbyist money, the amount of special interest money that has attached to both City Hall and Albany is extraordinary. And the number of people who are trying to walk through a revolving door, who see public service not as serving the public, but as a chance to line their own pockets. That is like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, there are millions and tens of millions of dollars that are getting spent on trying to influence the legislature.
And we're getting bilked. I mean, I see it as a real, you said, I heard the expression the other day, ROI, return on investment. A lot of these folks are getting ROE, return on ego.
Well, you know what? It's funny you should mention return on investment. There are some legislators that are on the record as taking a bunch of wealthy lobbyists and other donors to a golf outing, and standing up and openly saying, here's how you can get in on the ground floor, now's the time to invest, using those private sector terms to talk about basically their services and access to them as legislators, and it's horrifying. Yeah. It's really, it's a terrible thing.
You know, we're seeing these town hall. I know you spoke out on these town hall meetings on on Lou Dobbs.
Yes.
But I'm not so sure that people are so frustrated with health care, which I think they are. But I think that it's a bigger picture. They're just plain frustrated with government.
Well, that's right. That's right. The town hall meetings that spun out of control and had a lot of protesters, and some of them were broken up and so forth. Most of the complaints, if you listen closely, are not about the specific issue at hand. They're about a general sense that the legislature, that the private sector, and indeed the media are not on their side, are not listening to them, are not acting in their interest. It's really a sort of a broad social crisis of institutions, because the institutions that we trust to look out for our interests, the legislature, the executive branch, the courts, the media, they've been letting everybody down.
Along with the banks and things that you just thought were 101, American values you could trust.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, many of it's very interesting. If you look at a show like The Sopranos, some of these very popular shows, or The Wire, that was a big hit on HBO.
Big hit, right.
If you think about what that really was about, very much so The Wire, it was about the collapse of institutions and how the courts and the politicians, and even in their own way, the criminals, the drug gangs in the case of The Wire, the mafia in the case of The Sopranos, not what it used to be, not living up to its ideals.
They had a code, and you knew what that code was of the mafia. You knew where you stood. Here, you elect. It's a lottery. You elect somebody. Maybe that person is what you think he is, or she, and maybe he isn't. And who the hell knows if that person? Who the heck knows if that person is going to be working in your best interest?
Well, that's right. And as Tony Soprano said in one of the episodes, whatever happened to Gary Cooper, the tall, silent type, somebody who was reliable, who was going to pull his weight, who was going to look out for the whole.
What part does the media play? I mean, when you read the editorial page in the New York Times, we'll say, or the Wall Street Journal, are you getting what we used to call editorial, or the New York Post? Are you getting what we used to think of as editorial opinion or editorial writing, or are you getting opinion?
Well, I think what you're getting in a lot of cases is editorial boards, and because I sit on one at the Daily News, we do read all of those actually every day. I think in a lot of cases what you're getting is people who are taking stands not because they have a broad philosophy that they're trying to develop, but because this is just the position that they've taken and they want to stick with it. And it's a rut that any editorial board can fall into, and it's a very damaging one, because new stuff happens. Technology changes, politics changes, the country changes. But if you're stuck saying, well, we're never in favor of raising taxes, so we're going to attack every tax that comes down the pike,
right.
Well, that's a pretty stale
or we haven't seen a tax that we don't like.
Well, that's right. That's right. And either way, you end up, it's not a very good reading experience. And more importantly, it doesn't help the public, I think, understand what's going on.
And after all, isn't print journalism in trouble?
Well, as is broadcast. But yeah, certainly print. I mean, look, over 120 newspapers have closed since January of last year. And we haven't seen the end of it yet.
Yes.
And it's a very difficult environment. The leading advertising sectors in newspapers are real estate, employment, and automobiles. Wow. So the car industry is in deep trouble. The mortgage industry has collapsed, and there's a rising tide of unemployment.
Okay. So you're on this show. I asked you to be on, getting your money's worth. What can folks do that feel like they're not a piece of the political process anymore? Their voice doesn't count. Their elected officials don't care about them, or don't care, and everything is so partisan. What can we do to help ourselves out?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is, first of all, not to lose hope, and that is, in some ways, the most important thing.
That's the most important
thing.
Is that
right. You have to understand that there are people in the history of this country who have faced far greater problems. Whether you're talking about the Civil Rights Movement, whether you're talking about the Great Depression, being American means not just that you sacrifice in war or in some extreme situation involving physical courage, but you have to have the courage to hope and to work and to try to improve the country. It's a very patriotic thing to do. Secondly, I think, though, that there are a lot of tools. Primarily the Internet is what people talk about, but there's also calling into your radio station, going out to your town hall meetings, being engaged.
Writing or calling your congressman,
Absolutely.
your elected official.
Absolutely. In fact, let me say something about calling your congressman. A lot of people think that is a waste of time. I can assure you that it is not. At a minimum,
that's good to know.
They are keeping a tally of how many people called and from what zip code and what opinion they have on the issues of the day. They assign that to interns, it's true, but that congressperson they're
Can you
keeping an
call
eye
your
on it.
congressman even if he's not your party and you didn't vote for him or her?
Oh, I recommend it. I recommend it. Absolutely.
And you'll still get your attention.
Well, they'll log it. They will log it. And the reality is, if somebody is in charge of a committee that's dealing with the issue that you care about, a 30-second phone call, it couldn't hurt.
Absolutely. It's like chicken soup. It may not help, but it can't hurt.
Chicken soup.
Okay. So recently you had an interview with our governor, Governor Patterson, and he said these things, and then he backed off some things. What's your point of view? Is there a double standard in the media for color?
In the case of David Patterson, I think he's gotten a lot of unfair treatment. And I think that's why he came on my show to say that he thought that he was being treated unfairly.
Did he think you'd be more fair to him? Or
well,
just like WRLL?
I've been talking about it for months, actually, and I've written about it in the newspaper as well. Listen, this is the most progressive governor that we've had in probably 30 or 40 years. He is pushing for same-sex marriage. He amended the Rockefeller drug laws. He raised the basic welfare grant for the first time in 18 years. When push came to shove in a very tough budget, he chose to raise taxes on the rich, which is not something that was very popular with the rich, but it was something that really needed to happen. We have a system that's a little bit out of balance.
Yeah, except that New York State is the most heavily taxed state in the union.
Well, indeed it is. But, I mean, any given tax you can sort of say is only adding to the burden, but he had to do something to close the gap. Right. And so with all of this work that he's done and a lifetime of progressive activism and political work, I thought that it was unfair to judge him in this tough budget time as a failure merely because we have a tough economic situation. There are governors all over the country who have tough economic situations. So I think that the press hasn't been balanced in their coverage of him. On the other hand, I don't think that it's due to race. And that was the conclusion he jumped to that I think stirred a lot of controversy.
Right. I mean, don't you think that he was let folks down in their eyes when he couldn't control the legislature?
Well, I think
is that something that's beyond the governor's control?
I got to tell you, in the broadest terms possible, if the economy's doing well, the governor is considered a hero. Right. If the economy tanks, the governor is considered a bum.
My old boss in retail used to say, when you don't have the business, you get the business.
Right. Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And I could point to, and I've written and talked about this a lot. I mean, in California, Schwarzenegger, a Republican, catching hell.
IOUs.
Right, exactly. I mean, a complete meltdown of the fiscal situation out there. In Florida, the governor, Charlie Crist, another Republican, he's walking away from the job. He's running for the Senate.
Right.
In Alaska, she resigned. Sarah Palin resigned. So they're not black and they're not Democrats. And across the river, where you do have a Democrat, John Corzine,
he's in trouble.
Many points behind his Republican rival. And all of that is because we have a slumping economy. We have states that are cutting programs, raising taxes, and doing some very unpopular things. So the Governor Patterson, unfortunately, was going to catch hell no matter what he did.
Whatever, right, exactly. And after all, you're dealing with a population, too, that's been pretty softened. We're all pretty used to having life pretty easy for a long time.
Sure.
So
the price of your home, the value of your home goes up, your salary goes up.
It's like a tsunami. Everything that was going up suddenly went down.
Well, that's right. The tide is going out, and people are standing exposed.
So maybe they're standing exposed. Okay. Well, you're smart. I'll say that for you. You're putting yourself out there, and you're doing exactly what the rest of us should be doing, and that is looking for all kinds of new opportunities to do your field. You're a wannabe politician, aren't you?
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness, no. I ran for office a long time ago in 1997. That was my first and last run for office.
Okay. So you're on the sidelines writing about it.
Absolutely.
But you're also involved.
In the thick of it, writing about it, please, not on the sidelines.
Okay. Errol Louis, read his column. How often are you on? Are you daily in the news?
The column runs on Thursdays and on Sundays. The radio show's on every weekday.
Every weekday. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West. Thanks for watching.